Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who swears they're a genius at something, but in reality they're, well, not? Maybe it's that coworker who brags about their stock market genius right before a crash, or that friend who claims they're a master chef after burning a frozen pizza. I'll confess, I once thought I could fix my car after watching a single YouTube tutorial. Picture this. Me in the garage, covered in grease, surrounded by tools I barely knew how to use, and a car that wouldn't even start. My confidence was sky high until I realized I'd made things worse. It's funny now, but back then I was clueless about my cluelessness. This paradox isn't just amusing. It's a profound puzzle that challenges everything we think we know about human judgment. How can people, even brilliant ones like doctors, engineers, or philosophers, fall into such obvious traps of overconfidence? The answer lies in a psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger discovered something unsettling. The least skilled among us often rate ourselves the highest because we don't know enough to see our own flaws. Meanwhile, the truly skilled often doubt themselves, aware of the vastness they have yet to conquer. It's a mental trap that ensnares us all from the classroom to the boardroom. Today, we're going to unveil this phenomenon, explore why it happens to even the brightest minds, and most importantly, how you can break free. So grab a seat, let's dive into the depths of our cognition together. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We're on a journey to uncover life's biggest questions. So what exactly is the Dunning-Kruger effect? Let's break it down. Picture a hill, a graph of skill versus confidence. At the bottom, when you know almost nothing about a subject, your confidence soars. Say you're learning chess. After moving a pawn or two, you might think, I'm basically a grandmaster. But as you climb the hill, learning a few more moves, your confidence plummets into what's often called the valley of despair. Suddenly, you realize the game's complexity, castling, en passant, opening strategies, and you see how little you actually know. Only with true expertise does confidence rise again. But this time, it's grounded in real skill. This hill-shaped curve is the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger uncovered this in 1999 through a series of fascinating experiments. They asked participants to rate their abilities in areas like logic, grammar, and even humor, then tested their actual performance. The results were jaw-dropping. People in the bottom 25%, the least skilled, consistently rated themselves as above average, sometimes even claiming they were in the top 10%. Meanwhile, the top performers, the real experts, often underestimated their abilities because they were acutely aware of how much they still didn't know. It's like a novice painter thinking their first sketch rivals Van Gogh, while the master artist agonizes over every brushstroke, knowing the craft's depth. This isn't a one-off quirk, it's universal. Studies show the Dunning-Kruger effect plays out across domains. In medicine, overconfident doctors have misdiagnosed patients, thinking they knew more than they did. In finance, amateur traders often bet big and lose everything, blind to market complexities. Even in politics, we see leaders making bold claims with limited understanding, leading to disastrous policies. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates hinted at this centuries ago when he said, "I know that I know nothing." Socrates understood that true wisdom begins with recognizing our limits, a lesson many of us struggle with today. Let me share a story. A few years back, I watched a friend join a trivia night at a local pub. He'd skimmed a few Wikipedia pages beforehand and was convinced he'd dominate. "I've got this," he said, buzzing in first for every question. But here's the kicker. He got every single answer wrong. The room laughed, but instead of backing off, he doubled down, insisting the questions were unfair or poorly worded. That's Dunning-Kruger in action. Ignorance breeds overconfidence, and we're blind to our own mistakes. This effect isn't just individual, it shapes society. Think of viral misinformation on social media, where people with minimal knowledge sound convincing, spreading falsehoods. Or consider flawed leadership decisions. Leaders who overestimate their expertise can lead entire organizations astray. The Dunning-Kruger effect reveals a hard truth. Our perception of competence is often an illusion, and it's one we're all vulnerable to. So why does this happen? Let's dig into the mind's machinery and find out. Why do we fall into this trap? It's not a random glitch, it's a feature of how our minds evolved. Let's start with the most obvious reason: ignorance. When you're new to something, like learning to code, you don't know what you don't know. You write a simple Hello World program and think, I'm a tech wizard. But you're clueless about algorithms, debugging, or scalability. Without expertise, you can't judge your own limits, so your mind fills the gap with confidence. It's a blind spot we all share. Then there's the illusion of competence. Our brains are wired for shortcuts. A small win, like winning an argument with a friend, triggers what psychologists call the overconfidence bias. We think, I nailed that, so I must be great at this. In Dunning-Kruger's studies, they trained low-skill participants to improve, and something fascinating happened. As their skills grew, their self-ratings dropped. Why? Because they finally saw their prior overestimation. It's like taking off rose-colored glasses and seeing the world as it really is. Feedback, or the lack of it, plays a massive role too. If no one corrects us, we assume we're on track. Social media amplifies this. A bold post gets likes, and we dig in deeper, ignoring evidence to the contrary. I once saw a heated online debate about climate science where a self-proclaimed expert, with no background in the field, dismissed decades of research because it didn't feel right. His followers cheered him on, reinforcing his overconfidence. Dunning-Kruger found that external critique helps recalibrate our self-assessment, but we often avoid it. Why? Ego. Admitting we're wrong hurts, so our brain protects us with a confidence boost. Ever watched someone argue a point they clearly don't understand, doubling down despite the facts? That's ego and Dunning-Kruger teaming up. Evolutionary psychology offers another lens. Our brains didn't evolve to seek truth. They evolved to ensure survival and social cohesion. In our ancestral environment, being ostracized from the group was a death sentence. Conforming to the tribe's beliefs, even if they were wrong, was safer than pursuing objective truth at the cost of rejection. This explains why even smart people can cling to stupid ideas. It's often a triumph of social adaptation, not a failure of intellect. When a belief ties to our identity, whether it's political, religious, or cultural, rejecting it risks social exile. The smarter we are, the better we become at rationalizing those beliefs to fit our group's worldview. Yale psychologist Dan Kahan demonstrated this in a study. He gave participants identical scientific data but framed it as supporting either liberal or conservative policies. The result? The more mathematically skilled participants were, the more they twisted the data to fit their pre-existing views. Intelligence didn't reduce bias, it amplified it. This should humble us. As Socrates wisely noted, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Let's look at a historical example, the brilliant mathematician John Nash, portrayed in A Beautiful Mind. Nash revolutionized game theory, but during his struggles with schizophrenia, he became convinced he was receiving coded messages from aliens. His towering intellect didn't protect him. It fueled his ability to craft elaborate justifications for those beliefs, showing how domain-specific our skills can be. Or consider modern scams like Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. Madoff duped financial experts not because they were foolish, but because he exploited social proof. If all these smart people are investing, they thought, it must be legitimate. This social dimension means our beliefs aren't formed in isolation. They're shaped by the communities we trust, often creating echo chambers where overconfidence festers. Philosopher Hannah Arendt captured this perfectly. The most radical revolutionary becomes a conservative the day after the revolution. Our identities cling to beliefs, and challenging them feels like an existential threat, not an intellectual exercise. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just a personal quirk, it's a social force, and it humbles us all. So how do we escape the Dunning-Kruger trap? It's not easy, but it's possible, and it starts with awareness. Simply knowing this effect exists can change how you see yourself. Next time you feel overly confident, pause and ask, am I overestimating here? What don't I know? It's like turning on a light in a dark room, illuminating your blind spots. The philosopher Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Embracing that discomfort is the first step to growth. The second step is seeking feedback. Find someone who knows more, a mentor, a friend, or even an online community, and ask for honest input. In Dunning-Kruger's studies, external critique helped participants recalibrate their self-ratings. It's humbling, but it works. If you're learning photography, show your work to a pro. You'll spot flaws you never saw. I learned this the hard way with my car fixing fiasco. After my failed attempt, I called a mechanic friend who gently pointed out every mistake. It stung, but I learned more in that hour than I had in days of fumbling. Third, keep learning. The more you know, the more you see the gaps. Dive into a subject deeply, read books, watch tutorials, practice deliberately. If you're exploring philosophy, start with Plato's dialogues, then tackle Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Each step reveals how much deeper the rabbit hole goes. After my trivia friend's flop, he started studying history and science more seriously. A year later, he returned to that pub and won the night. Not because he was suddenly a genius, but because he'd climbed out of the valley of despair. Fourth, cultivate humility. It's okay to say, I don't know. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. Socrates knew this, and so did Albert Einstein, who once said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Why? Because imagination opens us to learning, while knowledge can trap us in overconfidence. Next time you're tempted to show off, pause and research instead. I once bragged about my cooking skills at a dinner party only to serve a dish that was, let's say, inedible. If I'd admitted my limits and practiced more, I'd have saved myself the embarrassment. Fifth, test yourself. Set small challenges. Write an essay, solve a puzzle, or take a quiz, and compare your results to reality. Real outcomes beat self-perception every time. Over time, you'll build a truer sense of your abilities, climbing that confidence hill with solid ground beneath you. This isn't just about you, it's about society. We can help others escape this trap by challenging misinformation with kindness and building communities that value truth over bravado. Psychologist Philip Tetlock studied super forecasters, people who consistently make accurate predictions. Their secret? They treat beliefs as hypotheses to be tested, not treasures to guard. They update with new evidence and seek out information that might prove them wrong. The scientific method itself is a safeguard against Dunning-Kruger, requiring peer review, falsification, and replicability to counter our biases. Perhaps the most powerful antidote is curiosity. Approach ideas with wonder, not defense. Psychologist Carol Dweck's research on mindset shows that people who see intelligence as malleable, not fixed, are more resilient and open to mistakes. As William James put it, a great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. True thinking involves following evidence, even when it challenges us. That takes courage, the courage to admit when we're wrong and to change course. The Dunning-Kruger Effect reveals a humbling truth. Our minds can trick us into overconfidence, blinding us to our own limits. But through awareness, feedback, learning, humility, testing, and curiosity, we can break free. It's a reminder that even the smartest among us can stumble, and that's okay. The ultimate irony is that recognizing our susceptibility to this trap can itself feel uncomfortable. It challenges our self-image as rational beings, but accepting that limitation is the first step to overcoming it. So I ask you, have you ever caught yourself in the Dunning-Kruger trap? Maybe with a skill, a belief, or a bold claim? What did it take for you to see your blind spots? Share your story in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear how this resonates with your own experiences. And if this exploration shifted your perspective, share it with someone you respect but often disagree with. The conversations that follow might not resolve your differences, but they could lead to something more valuable. A deeper understanding of how we all construct our realities, and perhaps a bit more humility in how we assert them. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Next time, we're exploring why clever minds fall for foolish ideas with cognitive dissonance. Until then, keep questioning, keep growing, and embrace the uncertainty. As Voltaire wisely observed, doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. The mark of a truly educated mind, as Aristotle suggested, is the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it. Sometimes, the thoughts most worth entertaining are the ones that make us most uncomfortable. Thanks for joining me.